that was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
In late 2017, the official promos for All Stars 3 were released, showcasing 9 queens that had gotten the golden ticket to return to the franchise to compete for a chance to become part of the Hall of Fame. Now, despite being the 3rd installment of All Stars, to many it was really the 2nd, because no one really considered All Stars 1 a quality season. That being said, since All Stars 2 was criticized for having 5 out of the 10 cast members be from the same original season, they made sure that the cast of the new installment would have more diversity, with 7 seasons being represented, ranging from season 1 to season 9. In this video, I'm going to discuss All Stars 3, a season that Trixie Mattel would end up winning, but not without a fair share of obstacles in the way. Please remember to subscribe if you haven't already, follow me on Twitter @GreenGayYT, and buckle in for the ride. Let's begin. 2017 was quite the year for RuPaul's Drag Race. The franchise had quickly skyrocketed in relevance thanks to the mega success of All Stars 2. So, World of Wonder, the company that produces the show, knew that it was time to make some big moves. The main network that aired Drag Race had been Logo TV for a good portion of the show's run. Season 9, which was filmed in the summer of 2016, would go on to be the last season to be filmed while the show's network was still under Logo TV, because by March 2017 it was announced that VH1 would become the new main network for RuPaul's Drag Race, which was a big step in terms of exposure to a wider audience. It also seems the World of Wonder was expecting a big opportunity like this, considering season 9 was the first season that they decided to film in full HD. It is widely speculated that the move to VH1 had a dramatic influence on what Drag Race would end up evolving into. For example, the first 2 episodes to be filmed under the network of VH1 was the season 9 reunion and finale, which included a last-minute twist to have a lip-sync for the crown, disregarding the contestants' track records and raising the stakes for the finale episode. Especially since for a while, the finale episodes were starting to get seen as sort of underwhelming, since most of the time people knew who was going to end up winning. It goes without saying that when Drag Race moved to VH1, the format of the show would shift to pander towards a more dramatized version of itself that seek to retain attention from its audience by finding ways of subverting their expectations. This meant that they had to begin experimenting with how far they could deviate from the main format of the show while still keeping the audience engaged. Along with the season 9 lip sync for the crown twist, we would see this on All Stars 3, where by the time we got to the finale, they introduced the jury of the queens to decide who would make it to the final lip sync of the season. But we'll get into that later. By the time VH1 announced that they would be the new network for the show, and their subsequent promise to deliver us a 3rd All-Star season, it was clear that the show now had the backing of a really big company that was ready to give them all the money they needed in order to provide us with content. VH1 was even responsible for reviving Untucked, that between season 7 and 9 had not been airing on television as it became an online World of Wonder series. Some have argued that the move to VH1 meant that Drag Race needed to pander itself more to wider audiences, which is why we had instances of censorship such as in All Stars 4 with Manila Luzon, who was not allowed by the production of the show to wear her period dress for the padded runway, because they cited it was too much in bad taste for the main stage runway, or the slow pullback that the shows had in queer pop culture references, or sexualized gay content in general. Anyways, All Stars 3 was filmed in the summer of 2017, with the official promo releasing late in the year. There was actually a lot of foreshadowing within this promo, such as Ben de la Creme knocking herself out with a disco ball, just like she knocked herself out of the competition, Trixie Mattel saying that she's a trophy,
I am a trophy,
and inevitably winning the season, or Morgan McMichaels asking where's the competition after barely even competing.
Competition? What competition?
The only thing that I felt was amiss from the promo of All Stars 3 was the decision to only feature 9 out of the 10 queens that were competing. This is of course due to Bibi Zahara Benet being a surprise contestant that not even the queens on the season were aware of until they entered the workroom. So the producers sort of wanted the audience at home to have the same experience, which is why she was excluded from any of the promo for the press weeks leading up to the premiere. Yet by that point, the diehard fans already knew that Bibi was the secret 10th queen, so it would have been cool to be able to see her partake in the promotion for that season as well. There was also a lot of controversy surrounding her return argument since many felt that since BB had already won season 1, she didn't need a second shot at the crown. But the argument from the show's perspective was that when season 1 aired, the show barely had an audience, so it made sense to give the original Drag Race winner the flowers and attention she deserved from the fans. Speaking of the cast announcement, people were also confused when it was announced that Shangela was also returning to All Stars, because they felt that the spot should have been given to queens that had never received an opportunity before, which Shangela did have since she was asked to compete on season 3. Despite this, Shangela was able to solidify herself as a clear contender from early on in the season thanks to her success in the challenges. As we know, the narrative by the end of the season was that Shangela was robbed, due to the fact that out of all the eliminated queens, only Thorgy Thor felt the need to vote for Shangela into the top 2 of the season, which was sort of ironic considering Shangela was the person responsible for eliminating Thorgy on episode 2. But despite all that, Thorgy was able to put her emotions aside and do what was right, which is a good thing. I mean, it would have been even more tragic if Shangela had not received any votes whatsoever. For a while, I wondered what it would have been like if Shangela had actually made it to the top 2 of the season, because Shangela famously said in an interview shortly after the finale what she would have done had she been able to lip sync to Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus. In it, Shangela describes how under the gold coat she was wearing, there was a bunch of balloons filled with confetti that would have started flying everywhere when she popped them. Along with that, the performance would have climaxed in her smashing up a piñata. Fortunately, Shangela ended up performing in real life what she would have done had she been able to perform Wrecking Ball. And honestly, it was sort of underwhelming after seeing it in action. Now for a time, Trixie's win was one of the biggest redemption arcs that the franchise had ever seen, because the last 2 All-Star seasons, the queens who'd end up winning were runner-ups of their original season. After all, Trixie's legacy on season 7 consisted of her being eliminated on the 4th episode, placing 11th, only to return later on in the competition, last 1 additional episode, and once again be eliminated. I always found it so amusing how on the episode of the dance challenge, while in Untucked, Trixie was super confident because she fully thought she was about to win the challenge.
I think I won this week.
Oh. Okay, Trixie.
So it was for sure a shock for her when she placed in the bottom 2 and was eliminated. To top it all off, when the season 7 cast was first announced, Trixie became one of the early fan favorites. A big reason for this was that her makeup style was so extravagant, it was sort of hard not to remember her. The hashtag Drag Race for Trixie movement was a key moment in Trixie's drag career, because it created one of the biggest upsets that the fanbase had seen in a while, where despite Trixie arguably doing a better job in the lip sync, she ended up getting eliminated anyways, while Pearl, who had been criticized by the judges as lacking personality, was able to stay another week. The outcry for Trixie to get justice gained a lot of traction online. It's sort of impressive how producers predicted that Trixie would end up being really liked by the fans, since she ultimately ended up returning to the competition weeks later. But throughout the week that Trixie's original elimination aired, many other queens expressed their support for Trixie, a foreshadowing of how marketable Trixie really was. This era was sort of immortalized with a video Trixie uploaded to her YouTube channel titled, "I'm Gonna Be Just Fine." Whenever seasons of All Stars were announced, each queen had different expectations from the fanbase. For example, even though it was just 2017, Trixie Mattel had already established herself as a very successful brand. Along with having her hit YouTube series with Katya, she had already released an album and was essentially the next big thing. So, if anything, Trixie had a lot to lose coming back to Drag Race because all eyes were on her to prove that she had the talents to slay the competition, which didn't really translate to most of her run on the show. I mean, she spent the first 4 episodes of the show mostly getting by, and Snatch Game was supposed to be her moment to shine, but would end up almost getting eliminated. Even the challenges that Trixie did end up in the top 2 felt sort of underwhelming, like the strange soup challenge that they put all the queens through. Nevertheless, she did end up having a sort of comeback towards the end of the season, but was still vastly overshadowed by Shangela. Once Trixie's career began to gain traction, there was rumors that she had been behaving like a diva around other local girls. Specifically, Detox had called out Trixie during a Roscoe's viewing party in early 2018, citing that Trixie had made degrading jokes against queens who made their living performing in bars, because it was something that Trixie personally does not do anymore.
There was a bunch of us there, and Trixie had herself a table right in the front, and the whole time was just like this. So afterwards, Trixie's outside, Jules goes up and talks to her, and she's like, oh, it's so great to see you here. I would love to have you at our bar, Hamburger Mary's in Long Beach anytime you're around. She goes, yeah, I don't do this. I don't do this.
This sparked the war between West Hollywood and Trixie Mattel. The height of the drama would manifest when Detox tweeted in reference to something Trixie said with, quote, yet another dig at the West Hollywood girls. This would be the origin of the yet another dig quote, which would later be turned into a song by Bob the Drag Queen in Alaska. But since then, it seems that Trixie is on much better terms with the West Hollywood queens, and has been known to give a lot of queens opportunities. Now, looking into All Stars 3, on episode 1, the talent show performances would result in Ben de la Creme and Aja being in the top 2, while Morgan McMichaels and Chi-Chi DeVayne were placed in the bottom 2. It was really hard to watch Morgan's storyline unfold on camera because of how dead set she was to be straight up about wanting to eliminate the strongest competition if given the opportunity. The nail on the coffin was when Ben de la Creme gave Morgan a chance to retract that statement, only for Morgan to basically say that if Ben is in the bottom at some point in the future, Morgan would gladly kick her off. Morgan McMichaels was known within the drag community to have a lot of power, especially in West Hollywood, as she had gained a pretty good working reputation among club owners, and despite her tough exterior, was rumored to be a really great person that was caring towards the people she worked with. Her return to the franchise was also just a couple weeks after she had gotten into drama with James Ross, aka Tyra Sanchez. To be honest, while it was completely justified, Morgan being eliminated first on All Stars was kind of a shock to me when I saw it. I guess it's because I have sort of a soft spot for queens that belong to one of the original seasons of Drag Race, because they tend to be the ones who are really underappreciated by the fanbase. Moving on to episode 2, the bottom 2 placements would end up being Thorgy Thor and Kennedy Davenport, which would go on to have a pretty big effect in how the rest of the season played out. In season 8, Thorgy was one of the fan favorites of the season. People even expected her to win Miss Congeniality because back then the fans still had the power to vote for who they thought was the nicest queen, which made it even more impressive that Cynthia Lee Fontaine would end up winning the title instead. Now, when Thorgy was eliminated on All Stars, she truly did not bother to hide the fact that she was bitter about how things played out. An exit line of "ew, Jesus gross," along with a lipstick message that shaded Shangela and a letter to Trixie that would cause turmoil weeks later. It was also clear that a lot of the queens in the room did not agree with the decision that Shangela made to get rid of Thorgy over Kennedy Davenport. When the All Stars franchise was relaunched in 2016 thanks to the format twist of All Stars 2, it created a new goal for Ru Girls to achieve, which meant that if you were able to get on All Stars, your status in the fan base would change. You'd gain even more popularity along with providing more content that would solidify a further legacy to any queen that goes on. That being said, there was always at least one queen from each season that seemed to get the opposite results, such as Pandora Box, who upon her return to All Stars 1 ended up coming across as sort of bitter and ended up getting in her own way after being paired with Mimi at first, and eventually would go home first. Or All Stars 2, where Ginger Minj seemed to have no pivotal storyline in the season, and she went from being a frontrunner on season 7 to sort of being pushed aside in All Stars 2. But nevertheless, at that point, just getting on an All Stars season would mean more bookings and thus more money, so it was really beneficial to a lot of them. By the time we get to episode 3, Thorgy's elimination had sparked some conflict among the queens. Specifically, Milk was very confrontational about how if it had been up to her, she would have chosen to eliminate Kennedy Davenport because she found Thorgy's Thor's drag to be more interesting, which would then solidify the bad blood between Milk and Kennedy. It's interesting because Milk entered season 6 being a sort of wild card. I mean, you could tell even from her promo look alone that she was going to be delivering some very unique looks. But aside from her entrance look, we didn't really get to see the side of Milk that we saw in her original season. I mean, in season 6 alone, Milk had delivered the first bearded runway along with the first Drag King runway. But on All Stars, even her talent show was sort of underwhelming. Milk would subsequently receive an edit that focused around her being a sort of diva among the other queens. It was also clear that the sentiment that a lot of the girls felt towards Milk was echoed throughout the season and beyond. Chi-Chi DeVayne said in an interview that out of all the queens in the cast, Milk was the most challenging to get along with because she allegedly only wanted to hang out with Trixie Mattel. By the time we got to the end of episode 3, it seemed that Kennedy had no choice but to eliminate Milk, because Milk was literally the only queen in the whole cast that outright said she would have chosen Kennedy to go home because she wasn't very impressed by her drag style. Now, when it comes to All Stars 3, a big component that now makes this season very special is the fact that it was the last time we got to see Trixie Davenport showcase her talents to the world. Trixie was one of the most anticipated queens to return because a big part of Chichi's storyline on season 8 was the fact that she came from a small town and was struggling financially, which resulted in her runway package not having very expensive garments. Something that Michelle Visage would end up calling her out for, saying that you don't need money to do drag, which is a very arguable thing to say, especially considering the level of advantage that queens who have the proper connections to designers are able to have in the competition, as opposed to those who have to make or buy everything with a very limited amount of resources. Despite all this, it was very shocking to see how much Trixie would end up flopping in her talent show performance. It's been rumored that Trixie actually dropped her baton many times, but it was edited out to make her performance seem a lot better than it actually was. Her bottom 2 placement was unfortunately justified, but thanks to Morgan McMichael's approach to the competition of announcing that she was going to eliminate the strongest competition, Trixie was able to live to see another day. Now, while Trixie was known in the fanbase for being a super talented lip syncer, what wasn't shown on the show was that Trixie is also a really talented singer. In an interview with Vulture magazine, Trixie said that she never really decided to make any music or hone in on her singing ability because she was too scared to show it to the world, since she hadn't received professional training for it. As you know, Trixie Davenport ended up getting a rare disease called scleroderma, and was actually experiencing symptoms of it throughout the filming of All Stars 3, but didn't get diagnosed with it until shortly after filming had ended. Scleroderma is a very serious disease that hardens the skin tissue of the body, causing issues in mobility along with damage to internal organs in the worst of the cases. It was clear that as the months went by, Chichi's health was drastically deteriorating.
He's like, all your tests came back good or whatever. He's like, but we think you have scleroderma. And I was like, sclero, what? I figured out, like, it's serious, bitch. This is a serious matter. So yeah, that's why it seemed like I've been gone. Cause I spent a lot of a lot of nights after that crying. I went through a state of depression. I wanted to kill myself. I was just like, how could I, work so hard all my life to achieve my goals, my dreams. It finally happened. And then now, 3 years into my success, I found out that I'm chronically ill. It's taken away my flexibility. I have zero flexibility in my wrists, my knees. Y'all, I can't put on my pads. Like my wrists and stuff my wrists and my fingers don't bend. Like they have like I can't ball up a fist. Like this is as tight as my fist can go.
Trixie also bared a really close friendship with Kennedy Davenport, who she had gotten a lot closer to from touring around the world. After season 7, Kennedy wasn't all that liked by the fanbase. I mean, sure, she made it all the way to 4th place and had some very successful moments, but due to Kennedy being part of the quote old lady brigade, which referred to the older queens that would gossip about the younger queens, many people were left with a bad taste in their mouth. Which was only made worse when Kennedy was responsible for sending Katya home, who had skyrocketed as a fan favorite due to how likable her personality was. To me, Kennedy seems like a person that just doesn't have time to deal with people's foolishness, which is why she's so cutthroat, which honestly is a quality that I do kind of like about her. It also sucks that All Stars 3 wasn't able to give us a moment where Kennedy Davenport and Trixie Davenport lip-synced against each other. But they did give us the iconic moment while on tour in Australia, a video that will be linked linked in the description of this video should you want to see it. Now, one of the biggest issues with All Stars 3 was Ben de la Crème's departure. When Ben de la Crème was announced, I don't think anyone really expected the amount of slayage that would ensue. I mean, even when she walked into the workroom, there was jokes made by other queens that Ben de la Crème had sort of disappeared after the airing of season 6. So when Ben de la Crème was in the top 2 for not just 1, but episode 2, 3, 4, and ultimately 6, most viewers were heavily impressed with what they saw. Especially considering since people expected Trixie Mattel to be a lot more of a contender than what she ended up showcasing on the first half of the season. Now, when it came to the moment where Ben de la Crème decided to eliminate herself, there was always a part of me that wondered if she still would have gone through with it had she been aware of the fact that production was gonna call her back into the show to vote for who from the top 4 should get eliminated. It's also been said that Ben originally refused to take part in the voting for who should make the final lip sync of the season, to the point where producers had to bring up the contract that Ben signed in order to get her to cooperate. In a way, Ben de la Crème played a big hand in sort of damaging the value of the season. I mean, she eliminated Morgan on episode 1, choosing instead to keep Chi Chi the Vain that had trouble excelling throughout her time in the competition. Then, on the episode of the eliminated queen's return, Ben chose to bring back Morgan McMichaels, a queen that despite everything clearly had zero chance of winning the crown, or even being a finalist that felt deserved. Had she chose to bring back Aja, who had just been eliminated the week prior, she could have potentially been a more satisfying finalist. But the truth is that Morgan had just missed 5 episodes and was only gonna get 1 episode between her return and the finale to prove herself. But on the bright side, Morgan got to showcase herself to the world for an additional episode. Ben de la Crème's run on All Stars 3 is an entire juxtaposition in itself, because Ben tried to market the way she navigated the game as one that was based entirely on fairness through the acknowledgement of track records. Yet through trying to retain this fairness, she'd end up eliminating Morgan, someone that had arguably performed better than Chi Chi in the episode, and even in the finale, Ben de la Crème voted for Trixie and Kennedy despite Bibi Zahara Benet and Shangela having the better track records. Regardless, Ben gave us yet another iconic moment with her departure, so I'm not too mad. All that being said, Trixie's win on All Stars 3 was also not a very good look for World of Wonder, who after being called out for having an all-white and blonde Hall of Fame, would have a season that consisted of a top 4 comprised of 3 queens of color, one of which was the clear frontrunner, but we still got a similar archetype of queen in the Hall of Fame, raising tensions for the next All-Star season to stop the pattern. Which of course is why so many fans felt that the tie between Monet Exchange and Trinity the Tuck was motivated by external politics. But that's a whole other topic in itself. One of the key differences between All Stars 2 and All Stars 3 is that the third installment focused a lot more on the drama aspect of reality television, while All Stars 2 focused more on the talent of each queen. Hence why Alaska would go on to win despite the fans not wanting her to, contrasted by Trixie Mattel winning after walking into the show being one of the most marketably successful queens of the franchise. In conclusion, All Stars 3 marked the start to a momentum in the franchise that would skyrocket its popularity with the public, because after this season, All Stars became a yearly thing, with nowadays almost 3 All-Star seasons in development from different countries. Trixie Mattel went down at the time as the queen who robbed Shangela from the crown, but it's hard to deny the star power that Trixie had back then and still retains to this day. It was truly a fun season to watch as it aired, even purely for the shock eliminations and overall fun atmosphere associated with it. I wanted to take a moment to thank my patrons. In the Elite Pink Squad, we have Matthew Burns, Gay Uncle, and Wendell Norris Realtor. And in the Green Squad, we have The Only Sean, O Nicole, Edgar Allan Pup, Franny Fishsticks, Tamin Ritter Fury, Emma Malinger, and Azure. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, like the video and comment how you felt about this topic. Follow me on Twitter @GreenGayYT to receive updates on future content, and I'll see you guys next time.